Welcome to the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, I'm Fawn Germer.
And I'm Michelle Brigman.
And this is the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast. Today, our guest is Maddie Zickel, who I know very well, and she doesn't know me at all because she's got this YouTube channel that sucked me in about a year ago when I had just bought my van. And, I watch a lot of van life stuff. And she's the reason that I added a spare tire to my van instead of using what Ram had put there, which was an inflator, and then got the extra special AAA towing package because there was this van, her van got stuck in the mud. And that was such a classic. And the reason I love Maddie is she's the real deal. Now, her YouTube is called Beer in Beautiful Places, and she went from doing the van thing to just completing the Appalachian Trail. And being someone who really respects the outdoors and thru hikers and, just really love that whole idea that came off in the, remember Wild when, the Reese Witherspoon movie that Cheryl Strayed wrote the book. The thing about the Appalachian Trail is it's way harder than the Pacific Crest Trail. And it's right up there with the Continental Divide Trail. So when we went with Maddie, you'd see moments where she was climbing up mountains, doing things really an inch at a time. It was a very big achievement. And she's posting these things a little bit later than she's actually doing them, because I think that's a security thing you're doing. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
And so she's back, but she's not back yet on YouTube. And so, Maddie, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm so glad you're here.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
And really impressed by what you did. That's, your honesty on all of this and your sense of humor really carries us through. There are a lot of people posting their adventures on YouTube, but, it's the real deal with you. So let's start with this. How old are you now?
I'm 31.
You're 31. And then how did you wind up being such an adventurer? And how did you announce to your parents you were going to be more of a nomad? What'd they say?
Well, I don't think I ever really sat down and thought, I'm going to be in my 30s and never have a steady place to live. It was kind of just after college, I had an internship, and that was working at a resort. And then that kind of led into seasonal work, which led into long-term travel, sometimes abroad, sometimes in the U.S., living in my van. And then I had done several shorter backpacking trips, and it just seemed like, okay, well, let's see if I think I'm ready for this challenge of doing the Appalachian Trail. Let's see if I can.
Michelle, how would you react if you had a daughter that was out there nonstop, living life to the fullest, but it's kind of on the edge?
Well, first of all, I would kudos to just the courage and bravery that it takes and endurance, just to do the thing and decide to do the thing. I would be absolutely terrified about risk and what's going to happen. And are you safe? That would have me losing my mind. And I would hope that wouldn't override support. But as I think about it with my parent hat on, I don't know if you would feel like, I'm your champion and ally. It might be a little bit of a downer.
Mm-hmm.
Did you experience some of that? Even from just friends? And
I think my parents were, they do worry about me. It seems like after I come home from any adventure, they're just like, okay, so you're going to settle down now, right? And I'm like, no, not really. So I'm sure, I'm giving them some gray hairs, but at the end of the day, I think my parents understand that this is just the life I want to live, and it's something I feel like I need to do. Other people in my life have been supportive as well. I think some people I know, like extended family members who aren't as outdoorsy, don't really understand, like, why would you take on that huge of an inconvenience and really spend all that time out in the woods? But for the most part, people I know have been very supportive.
I'm curious, what was your major in college?
Parks and Recreation, actually.
Well, there's a surprise.
I wanted to be a summer camp director, so that really fit in well when I was doing seasonal work. But after a while, I just realized that wasn't really the industry for me, and that's kind of when I started thinking about YouTube and making videos of my adventures. So it was a pretty perfect time for a career change in my life when that happened.
How long have you had your YouTube channel?
Since 2020.
And you're faithful posting with them.
Thank you. I try.
What's amazing, and I don't have this ability, is that you can keep people sucked in for 20, 30 minutes when not much is even happening. So what's the trick to that?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm figuring it out all the time. I try to keep the clips short so that you're always looking at something new every couple seconds, and it's just a guess and check type thing. I'm sure in the beginning my videos were probably weren't as interesting or fast paced, and it's just something I figured out along the way.
That goes back to that saying, do it ugly, right? That goes back to that whole advice of do it ugly, try to make it so perfect and be willing to just get yourself out there. Were you terrified the first time you started videoing yourself and putting it on YouTube? How would that feel?
Yes, definitely. I'm a sensitive person, so I was really worried about just mean comments. Luckily, I was so small that the haters couldn't really find me. And then when they did, I was like, oh, wow, it isn't ideal, but at least I know my channel's growing.
For those people that are sitting in their lounger at home watching TV that have such a strong opinion.
Exactly.
Is it lucrative enough to keep you afloat indefinitely?
I'm not sure about indefinitely, but for now, I think if I keep doing what I'm doing, keep trying, keep learning, that is definitely my career plan for right now.
I think on the AT, your trail name was Ranger. You said you weren't sure about it, but it kind of seems like it fits. So how did you get that?
Well,
and tell them what a trail name is, because many people don't know that.
Yeah, so a trail name is a tradition that actually began on the AT, but now I think, AT meaning Appalachian Trail, but now I think most long distance trails, everyone gets a nickname if they want. Some people choose to just go by their real name, but it's just a nickname, usually that someone suggests or gives to you, like something funny you did, something like that's a characteristic of your personality. Just a trail name can just be anything, and it's really fun. It's just something to make life a little more interesting.
And then you found a boyfriend out there?
I did, yeah. I was really going into it, not looking for anyone. And at first, once we got together, I was thinking, I'll probably leave this out of like my videos and stuff because I don't want to come across as like encouraging other people to, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, thinking too much about it, but I was worried about coming across as like portraying the trail as kind of a place to meet someone. And that
spot.
Yeah. I have met other couples on the trail that seemed to be like that was kind of a really important part of the trail for them. And it was an important part for me too, but it was just a small part of an overall experience.
How did he get his name Smoke?
Well, his full name is Smoke Master. In the beginning, he was sitting by a campfire, and someone came up and said to the person making the fire, oh, I'm sorry, I messed up the story. He was sitting by a campfire, getting all sorts of smoke in his face. No matter where he would move, the smoke would follow him. And so someone said to the person tending the fire, you should be fire master, and you, the smoke, should be smoke master. So,
wow, I just thought it meant he was stoned all the time from his weed. So when you went on the trail,
mm-hmm.
when you look at who you were when you started and then who you were when you finished, what changed?
I think just having the experience under my belt, I felt a lot more ready to know what to expect. In the beginning, I was like, I don't know how far apart the water sources are or what my days are going to look like. But then after, getting used to life on the trail, kind of falling into a rhythm of what my days would look like, I just felt so much more, I knew what to expect.
And did it improve your confidence?
I think I was already a pretty confident person when I started the trail.
It had to be getting out there.
Yeah.
Making the decision to do it. Question for you, though, talking about kind of community, and you were talking about people you meet. So, I mean, you started this on your own, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who are the people you meet along the way? Like, what is this community like? And then what sort of evolves from this community? Because they show up at a very specific time in your life and they kind of go away. So, I mean, I'm just curious about that.
Well, the first couple of days, I was just being as friendly as I could, meeting everyone, just really enjoying, because everyone's just so excited in the beginning. So that was one of the highlights of the trail, was just beginning. And then as time went by, I was in the beginning, I was more focused on getting into my own pace to start with. And then I happened to camp with this really funny group. I thought they were just so great, so supportive of each other. And I just there was never a time when I asked, like, can I join you? And they never asked me, but we just kind of mutually knew. I just started trying to figure out, just ask where they were camping and then be like, oh yeah, I think I'll go there too. And eventually just merged my way into the group. We stayed together till about Connecticut, and then people wanted to go different paces. Some people just wanted a more solo experience. So it was so cool at the same time, though, because while that was the core group that I stayed with, but also I was friendly with a lot of other people on the trail too. So it was just kind of like, always exciting to see who's going to be at the shelter for the night, or when you go into town, who's going to be there. And it's just kind of a moving community. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this trail specifically, is there's so many people and that kind of social nature of the trail is present.
So I've hiked some on the Appalachian Trail. I'm never going to be a backpacker because I don't have the knees for that. And I have my other athletics. I'm not slob on that. But I did do a horseback trip up there once. And and so I've wondered about this, because here's what I remember most about it. We met this couple that decided to do the AT for their honeymoon. And I couldn't imagine anything less romantic than something where you're filthy. And, because we had horses, we had a ton of extra food, we had steaks. And the next day when we're leaving, I remember I gave her an apple, the woman, and she held that apple like I had handed her a gold nugget, and like just fresh fruit. She just stared at it. And then the other thing I remembered, because we stayed in a shelter like the ones you stayed in, and you may have been in that one yourself, and there were mice everywhere. And it was like that whole night, I remember I was like shuffling my feet because I didn't want a mouse to get on me. So what was that whole experience like?
Yeah, it's tough. There definitely is there's mice in the shelter sometimes, and you're always so hungry. So it's definitely a challenge. That was a really interesting choice that couple chose that for their honeymoon, but maybe they're just really extreme and wanted to do something adventurous together.
What was it romantic for you when you met Smoke?
Not romantic in the traditional sense, but we got to know each other on such a deep level because we both liked to hike around someone else, whereas other folks we knew kind of like to go by themselves, but we spent a lot of time together. And just when you're hiking, you can either be silent or be talking, and the silence doesn't seem like you need to fill it. You can just have a comfortable silence together. You're not looking at each other, not making eye contact. So you're not really, so you can kind of just speak from the heart and not really worry as much about how you're coming across. And you see each other at some of your worst moments and some of your best moments. And it's really just a cool way to get to know somebody.
Yeah, that must have been. Where did you get the name? You're in beautiful places.
Well, actually, I started as an Instagram, and at first it wasn't even something I was really that into, just like, hey, I happen to be in a really cool place drinking a beer. This happens a lot. Why don't I start a series of photos of just my beer in beautiful places? So that's how it started. And then when the pandemic happened, I was just looking for things to do. So I expanded onto YouTube. And then it turned out that was something I should have done a long time ago. It's something I love so much and get so much back from doing it. So
Maddie, you talked about earlier, like in the beginning, being really excited to get started, but you were doing some really hard things that gets tough where you want to throw up your hands. And I mean, this happens to everybody. They don't have to be hiking the AT, right? It could be their job and life. How do you keep yourself motivated and on track and not just throw up your hands and say, to hell with all of this?
I think a lot of it was positive peer pressure, I would say. Like, no one was saying, oh, you have to go to this next shelter with the group. But I was like, everyone else is going, might as well. And just wanting to spend more time with people. And the way to do that was to keep up with everyone else. There was one point in Virginia where I was just having a really bad day thinking, why am I doing this to myself? And the first thing that came to mind was just, if I left, then I wouldn't get to see anyone again and have this experience with them. So I think if I was doing it as a more solo experience, I have done backpacking trips by myself, and it's been, I don't know, it just definitely, I was able to provide myself motivation because of that, and because of the other people.
How many days were you out there?
202.
Oh, and we're up to what, 195 already that you've posted?
Mm-hmm.
What was it like when you finished for real, the actual end? Was that sad or happy?
Oh, both. Mostly happy because I was with Smoke and we were both having pretty bad days. It seemed like every day we were in Maine, our feet would be wet, and it's just such a morale killer to put on wet shoes and wet socks in the morning. The nights had gotten cold, and we were both just really looking forward to being able to be done, especially because we did the end of Maine, or we did Maine out of order. So because of that, it kept seeming like, oh, we have more to do. And it seemed like the miles were just stretching out. We never seemed closer to the end until that final day. So it was a relief, a huge weight off our shoulders. But at the same time, I was really overwhelmed with gratitude and just remembering how much the trail had given me, how many memories, how many, meeting my boyfriend for one, and just so many good things, as hard as it was.
Are you home in Louisville now?
Yes.
And what's next?
Well, for the winter, Smoke and I are hoping to get a place together. He happens to only live an hour away, which is really nice. It's not really even long distance. But we're hoping to move in together, get an apartment, and then throughout the winter, I'm gonna put out videos about my gear and how I wish I would have paced myself better, the high points, the low points. I have so much, like during the hike, I was just putting out vlogs, but now I want to put out more like informational or more like taking a look back at the hike. So that's coming out this winter. And then in the spring, I'll probably move back into my van at some point just because while I have it, might as well use it and then just keep exploring the world.
So would Smoke fit in the van too?
The van I have, no. He wants to make it work, but there's no way. It's a cot-sized bed, and it seems like it's not even enough room for me to move around in sometimes. So we might do long distance during that, or we would. It would be cool if he could get a vehicle of his own that was kind of converted and we could travel together like that. But right now, I don't know.
That's what I want for a relationship. Somebody in like another house, right? And then they get together every now and again. You know, I'm a big adventurer and I started a YouTube channel, but here was the problem that I had. Because I like the filmmaking and all of that. But I felt whenever I was doing my adventures, I had to worry about getting this shot and that shot. And you have to show yourself walking and you have to position the camera. And I was more worried about the shots than I was enjoying my adventures. And so I thought, this is not, I don't have much time, so I want to enjoy what I'm doing. How does that impact your adventure? And can you tell people a little about how you get these shots?
Yeah, so for most of the trail, I was carrying a tripod. I actually went through 3 different tripods throughout the whole...
A big tripod or little?
There was one big tripod I used at the end because it was the only thing I could find, but the first 2 were smaller ones that were lighter. So sometimes I set the tripod up, walk past it, and come back for it. Sometimes I try to walk as smoothly as I can while I'm filming. Sometimes, especially once I met Smoke, it was really nice because he would film me and either walking behind me or moving the camera along as I walked. So that was really handy too. There was a lot of times especially when I was climbing some really hard mountains, when I was just like, okay, maybe I'll film a few shots and then be done with it. But there were also areas when I was walking through and it was just so beautiful that I was like, I feel so compelled to film this. And it adds a layer of enjoyment to it too, because I'm just having so much fun filming. Like I remember one of the first really foggy days, I just was taking the longest time ever because every single flower, every single view of fog moving across the branches above me was just so pretty, and I was enjoying filming it so much.
And what are you learning in terms of what's most important to you through this experience?
Ooh.
What brings you joy?
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely... I had a suspicion before, but I definitely learned all over again that I'm a person that likes to be around other people. Yeah, I've already talked before on that, so I don't want to go too much into detail again, but just how much I enjoy other people's company. What else?
Well, it makes it more secure too, right?
Yeah, definitely. I really felt less out in the middle of nowhere, because if I did fall down and hurt myself, I knew there's at least 5 at the lowest, I guess, but there's always going to be some other hiker that's coming behind me, even if it's someone I haven't even met before. Like, it's such a popular trail that if you need help eventually, someone else will be around.
How long between that? That's interesting.
It would depend what part of the trail you were on. In the beginning, I felt like I crossed paths with people maybe every hour or so.
Oh, wow.
And it's hard to tell because I usually don't stop, I keep on moving and everyone might be moving at about the same pace. But definitely in the beginning, I would see a lot more people than in the end. It seemed like the first 3 or 4 weeks were the biggest amount of people. And then at the end, especially when I was still on trail and most other people had finished their through hike, then it was maybe I might cross paths with one person during the day.
It seems like this crossing of the creek, we need to tell that story and then really what you learned through that, because that was really an exciting video. So
Sure. So throughout Maine, they don't have a whole lot of bridges. They just want you to walk straight through the creek. So a lot of people will carry a separate pair of like sport sandals or Crocs, specifically for creek crossings. So this one day it had been raining like from the afternoon into the night into the next morning. So a lot of rain. And I think the name of it was the East Branch of the Piquetis River. I might be pronouncing that wrong. But I had gotten across that morning. I got across, I think it was 2 streams that were already pretty challenging. They weren't up past my knees, but the water was really moving pretty fast. So I was already pretty wet. And as I was wading through some standing water, I noticed ahead of me there was a bunch of people standing, and I was like, "Oh no, what's going on?" So when I came up, they said that it was about 9 of us. They had all gathered from people that were staying at the shelter near there or different campsites. Everyone was just kind of there, and we had heard of someone else getting across before we were there. So we were like, okay, we know it's possible. People had looked for different ways to go around the creek or maybe a shallower section, but no one could find another way. So we were talking about who had string with them or line, rope. A lot of people will tie up bags of food in trees so bears can't get to it. And 3 people had strings we could use.
And we got to tell the listeners, it looked like the thinnest line ever for they call it a creek, but it looked like a river. It had
a yard
current. Yeah. It had a tough current. How deep was it actually?
It was, I think the deepest part was up to my neck, actually.
And
so 5 feet.
Okay, so 5 feet, and then how far across do you think that was?
I would guess 30 feet.
It looked wider than that, man. But I mean, it looked quite. That was a very intimidating thing that you went through, because I mean that current was so obvious. Like, where would it have taken you to if you let go?
Yep, exactly. It was. Definitely, looking back, we were really lucky that nothing happened. And, when you're in a moment, you sometimes don't see the whole situation. And now looking back, I really wish I hadn't crossed and I had tried to talk other people into not crossing. But that wasn't something that crossed my mind in the moment.
Okay, let's come back to that, because that's an interesting thing. So you get out there, and then what happens?
Watching other people, it didn't seem that bad. And I was thinking, I'll just try to keep my feet on the ground and keep walking forward. But once I got out to the middle, it seemed like the rocks were rolling out beneath me, or they were kind of mossy and my feet would slip off. So I lost my footing and I started to panic. And now I could have started to use my hands to stay along the string, but use my feet to kick like I'm swimming. I could have just kept moving anyway, just with my hands, and stayed upright. But in a moment, I was just panicking. And throughout the trail, I was really in the mindset of like, let yourself feel your emotions. There's no need to like pretend you're okay when you're not. Just be real with how you're feeling. And I think that this moment, I really shouldn't have done that. I should have been like, no, you're fine, you're cool. Just keep going, and not have like, it should have been kind of mind over matter. But anyway, I didn't think of that then. And I was just really panicking. I couldn't really hear anyone. People, if I go back and watch the video now, I can hear people encouraging me or telling me, keep going or go back. But in the moment, I thought I was just kind of alone in the creek and everyone was just kind of staring at me while I was panicking. So eventually I asked one of my friends what to do. He is a really strong swimmer and he was kind of like the point person that day of the creek crossing. He was the one that swam the string across in the first place. So I asked him what to do. He said to go back, and I did. And then I tried it again without my pack on, because that was another thing. Just, I thought I was a good swimmer, but I've never been fighting current before, especially when wearing a 30-pound backpack. So that was another challenge, wearing the pack. And so, like I said, I wish I would have not crossed. But then a few minutes later, I was just like, okay, I'm going to try it again, this time without my pack. Someone else brought it over for me once I got across. And that was a really cool feeling of getting across eventually. That was kind of a cool moment. And it really, like the 9 of us that were there, I really appreciated how everyone stayed to help the people that were still there. No one was like, okay, I got across, so I'll see you all later. It was definitely, you could definitely see that people really cared about each other and were looking out for each other getting across.
And you said that you kind of, if you had it to do over again, you wouldn't have made the crossing.
Mm-hmm.
And that there were others that probably wouldn't have either, correct?
Yeah, definitely. Some people, because I was walking with a lot of those same people, it seemed like a lot of people regretted doing that. Once we realized oh my goodness, we could have lost our lives. There was an AT information center in the next town, and I went there and was talking with the person that worked there, and she said that the river was 10 times what it should be to do a safe crossing. So, yeah, looking back, I think most of us are like, we shouldn't have done that.
So, Michelle, now comes the leadership lesson, and I'll tell you why. So I'm one of the things I do a lot of kayaking, and I did a kayaking expedition in the Everglades, in the 10,000 Islands area of the Everglades, and we had a very bad guy leading us. And we launched in really bad conditions, and he kept getting us lost, and you couldn't see anything. And it's called 10,000 Islands because there's so many islands, and it was so foggy, you never saw land ever. And when I was the one who started talking back, because there was an island, and I'm like, I'm going up there, and it was one we didn't have a reservation to be on, and he's like, the rangers will kick you off, and I'm like, I don't care, I'll ask them for a ride.
Yeah.
And I looked at one of the other paddlers, so there were 3 other guys and me, and then the guide that was with us, right? And one of the guys looks at me and he shrugs his shoulders, and I thought he was communicating, come on, it's not a big deal. And what I didn't realize is that he was communicating to me, please take charge. And that when you're in a situation like this, and this is not about the AT or the 10,000 islands in my kayak, it is about when you are either following a bad leader or not trusting your gut. And that somebody has to have the courage to say, this isn't right. I'm not going to do this, because we were out there so late. It was only in the very last light of day that we found a place to camp, that there was an island. And if we hadn't, we would have just been adrift in the Gulf of Mexico, not knowing where we were. And we would, I don't even want to think about what might have happened with that. But it's like people are waiting for someone to say, this doesn't seem real smart. So do you think you're going to do that more quickly?
Yeah, definitely. I just know more about river crossings now. Because up until that point, it wasn't even really, I guess everything is to some degree dangerous, but it wasn't really dangerous up until that point. And I was just kind of like, oh, okay, well, I just didn't have enough experience to know that it wasn't a good choice. But now I do, and I would definitely, the river crossings for the rest of the trail, even though it was never to that extreme, I was always thinking, like, is this safe to cross? Do we need to just camp on this side and wait till it goes down? It never got to that point again, but it was definitely in the forefront of my mind from then on.
Well, Michelle, before you wrap up, let me ask you, because Michelle's she's my corporate rock star. And you see any parallels between that and when things get really tricky in the rest of life or at work, when somebody is waiting for someone to say, I'm not going there. I'm not doing it that way. Is it hard to be the one that says this is a bad call?
I think it depends I think sometimes, yes, it's very hard. Sometimes it's not so hard. I think it has a lot to do with not only the person, but the people around them, the culture of the company. Can you challenge? Can you ask questions? I mean, I certainly have worked for, I have very specific example of working for leadership that a simple question resulted in a person getting fired, like not a challenging question, not an inappropriate question, but a basic question turned into, I didn't like that he asked that question in the meeting, and I'm going to go so far as fire him, versus other leaders who can say, you know what, thanks for raising that concern, tell me more. And then that being a moment of like, well, let's pause and reevaluate and reassess and figure out what the best way is. I mean, those are the signs of a really strong leader, whenever they know when it's time to listen before acting and taking feedback and perspective from the people around them, because you probably have some pretty smart people around you.
Definitely. I think a good leader is very honest with themselves and the people around them about what is my expertise in and what do I need to listen to other people about.
Michelle, so you want to wrap this up and tell us what the nuggets were this time?
Awesome. Thank you, Maddie, so much for just sharing your story. I mean, so inspiring. And like I say, I admire your courage and bravery for putting yourself in risky situations. While you're thoughtful with it, it's putting on risk. But wow, I mean, what growth and what blessings you have coming out of it. A couple of things that I really took away listening to you was just to appreciate the beauty around you in the moment when you're there, because oftentimes, we forget to just be present, be in the moment. We're so busy worrying about all the other things. And I think that what I heard coming through from you is just, like you said, going out in the meadow and seeing something so beautiful and just slowing down and enjoying that beauty. Also reminding us about the power of of relationship and community in your best and worst of times, to have those people around you who are there to celebrate with you, to put a hand out and help carry you whenever you need to be carried. So be wise about who you are surrounding yourself with, even if they're just there for a season or a short point in your life. The quality of the people matter. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of wrote down, just do hard things and learn to enjoy the process of doing the hard things, because at the end of it, when you can look back, you're stronger, you're more confident, life is sweeter, you've grown, you have wisdom. And I think those three things were the kind of real themes that I had coming out of hearing your story. So thank you so much for sharing yourself with us and on your YouTube channel, which we encourage everyone to watch.
Which is Beer and Beautiful Places. And, Maddie, just keep doing it your own way. We're all learning from you. You're 31 years old and you're teaching me, which is something, and it's very exciting. I think it'll be exciting to see where you are in 10 years and just what adventures you take the rest of us on. So thank you so much for joining us. I feel very privileged to have had this time.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a privilege to be here.
Very well, thank you.
Thank you for joining the Hard Won Wisdom podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.